Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Today we are performing surgery on two computers. That's right, these are the two systems that were featured in the dual slot 1 CPU ? Video that we did a little while back. If you recall, this particular computer here was a Pentium 2 dual CPU system. I can't remember exactly the megahertz. It does say 450 on the case, but I vaguely recall something indicating that we did not have that in the system, but we're going to find that out as we go. On this system here, or in this system here, we have a Pentium 4, perfectly working system, no problems at all. And the thing is, the case itself is way too much for the board that's in this computer, as well as the associated hardware. So this computer over here is chock full of hardware, and unfortunately, it looks like they kind of shoved this motherboard in this case to fit. Some of the cards are bending, the motherboard looks like it's bending a little bit, so I want to kind of give it some reprieve and give it the proper home it deserves in this beautiful case right here. So you know what? We have lots to do. Let's get right to it. Okay, and here we are inside the dual Pentium 2 system here, the slot 1 Pentium 2 system. And it's just an absolutely beautiful looking machine. And it has just so much hardware in here installed, and the motherboard is absolutely massive. It's a good Asus motherboard. So I want to work on getting this system all taken apart. We're not going to do anything with the chassis. Maybe in a future video, we might look at trying to restore this system or this chassis for another computer. But for now, we're just going to take out the hardware. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of this structural bar here. It looks like there's just two screws on either end of it. And what a great design to be able to have that for strength, adding strength to the case itself. Okay, now that that's done, I'm just going to take this ribbon cable. It looks like a SCSI ribbon cable by the looks of things. They probably had a SCSI hard disk inside this system, probably into this controller. I don't know if that's a RAID controller or just a SCSI card. You can see here that there's some bending on the cards in themselves. And that's unfortunate. There's definitely some bending going on with these two cards and the video card itself as well. And I think it's because of the way the motherboard is positioned in this case, it was kind of forced into fitting properly. So yeah, we definitely don't want that happening. So we're going to take all this apart and save this hardware. So in order to continue taking this apart, we're just going to remove all the ribbon cables, get them out of our way, remove them from the motherboard as well. I mean, it's always easier taking apart than putting back together. So there we are. There's our power supply that's up there. I'm just going to leave the power supply inside of the case because, again, I don't know. I can't remember this working or not. Judging by the fact it's not connected to the motherboard after we were troubleshooting, my guess is not. So they have the hard drive LED attached to this card. So if this was truly running, the SCSI controller was running the hard disk, they probably had the connector there, the hard drive LED connected to that as well. So makes total sense. All right, we'll remove all those. Okay, what we're going to do now is remove the memory just because it's easiest to access. There we are. And what we have here, we have 128 megs of SD RAM. We have another, let's see here, another 256. Okay, and we also have 32 megs. Next thing we're going to do is remove the video card. So we're going to explore these cards as we go. I know we did a brief overview in the video originally, but again, we didn't really go over the cards. So here we are. We have an ATI video card. It looks like an ATI Rage 128 Pro video card. So I believe this is a 16 megabyte card. Keep me honest in the comments, but yeah, we're fine for that for now. You know, one of the things we're going to do is just get everything transplanted into the new case and get an actual hard drive installed and get the system up and running. So we can certainly try out using this card, but there are other cards available, obviously, if we want. Now, I'm not going to utilize the SCSI controller here. It does come with this system, but I'm not interested in using SCSI, to be honest with you, so I don't see myself utilizing it in this system. And it does have built-on IDE, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay, so in terms of a card here, I'm just looking at it anyway. It's an AHA2940 is this card here, so a SCSI adapter. So again, nice to have an extra one in the collection for sure, because I do have a couple of SCSI hard disks and other drives, but again, I'm not doing that in this build. Okay, so it looks like we have an Ethernet controller here, just by the looks of things, but it's definitely warped, just the way they installed this, and it's a shame, really. So it just says S82557 chipset, 1989, 1995. So I don't exactly know what this Ethernet controller is, but I do know that I will be replacing it with something probably like a 3COM or what have you. Looks like this system had dual NIC. Yeah, it did. So it has dual network controllers. So there we go. We have identical cards. So whatever model this is, I'll have to look this up online and see, but we do have the dual NIC there as well. Now, when I go to do this system, it's not going to have dual NIC. We can get away with just one network card is fine. Okay, and this final card that we're taking out here, as you can see, this computer was chock full of hardware. Let's pull this out. There we are. So it looks like we have a Creative Labs Sound Blaster card. Model, let's see if I can find the model, CT2940. So I believe this is just a Sound Blaster. I don't say just because Sound Blaster is awesome, but Sound Blaster 16 card with an IDE interface on the card as well. And copyright 1994. Okay, we're going to remove the CPUs. So to do that, just a couple little clips in the top, and then they just kind of rock back and forth like that, and then they should slide right out. There we are. So there's our processor, and it looks like it is, I'm not seeing here, it looks like a Pentium 2 350, to be honest with you, and I think that's what threw me off, because on the case it says, on the back it says Pentium 2 450, but it does have dual Pentium 2 350s, I believe is what it is. And so we'll do the same thing here, and you got to be very careful with these latches when you're pulling them out to make sure you're very gentle, because unfortunately these are very brittle over the years, and I've broken them off before. Okay, so there's our second processor, and we have a Pentium 2, it looks like 450 there as well. So it's nice having the dual CPUs before dual core became fancy. So we're going to leave the optical drive and the floppy drive in this chassis. I'm not looking at utilizing those again. This is just a generic, looks like a generic CD-ROM drive. I'll be putting a different optical drive in this computer. Let's get the motherboard removed here now. So we're just going to remove some screws, and we'll end up doing a jump cut to get this all out. Okay, and we have our motherboard out of the case, and it's a really nice looking motherboard. Seems to be in excellent shape, which is good. And it doesn't seem to be too warped or bent there. I mean, it was definitely in that case pretty tightly. Okay, so we have an Asus motherboard. It's a P2B-D motherboard with an Intel chipset here. We have our dual slot 1 interfaces here for our CPUs, which we already know we have, which are Pentium 2 350s. We have 4 SD RAM slots, floppy connector. We have our 2 IDE ports as well. Looks like we have the ability, it looks like these boards or these PCBs were utilized for future revisions or different models. That also has different SCSI interfaces here. So we do have those connectors that you could potentially put new headers on, but of course we're not going to be doing that. But no doubt it probably has onboard RAID compatibility to allow that connection directly. Now in this particular case, we did have a RAID card installed. So over here, we have our ATX connector here for our power supply. I'm looking at the capacitors. I'm not seeing any sort of issues with the caps themselves, so that looks pretty good. And on our back here for connectivity, we have our 2 PS2, 2 USB, 2 serial, and a parallel. No built-on sound or anything like that, because I mean we do have the card anyway, but you can see that the earlier models did not have that as part of the package. So down here we do have our AGP interface here. We also have 4 PCI slots and 2 ISA slots. I love seeing the array, as I mentioned in my previous video, when I see these boards with multiple interfaces. I mean, these would not have been cheap back in the day to purchase, and because you do have full functionality, you have a full array of compatibility with regards to old versus newer. As time was progressing, it kept some of the legacy features, but also moved forward for the additional interfaces here. So we also have an Award BIOS, that famous holographic sticker that we have on the BIOS, so we do have that chip here as well. So yeah, I'm very happy with this board overall. I mean, it looks to be in excellent shape. It doesn't seem to be any sort of gouges, scratches, things like that. I've been looking over it. And of course, we live in a day with coin cell batteries in this particular case, so no battery leakage to do any eating of the traces on the motherboard PCB itself. And of course, no doubt that battery needs to be changed out, so we will do that. The other thing I will mention is that I was able to locate a network card, just probably a 10100, I believe this is. So we have a DFE 530TX by D-Link, a pretty standard card back in the day, PCI, nothing fancy, but huge compatibility and lots of drivers available, so we'll get that installed as well. All right, so I'm going to move forward. I'm going to get all these different components cleaned up because, quite frankly, they're quite dirty and dusty, and yeah, I mean, they deserve some love, so I'm going to go work on that, so here we go. Now that we have all of our components all wiped down clean and now all officially good to go, what we're going to do is clean up all the bench, get all this out of the way, get the other system on the bench, and we'll start taking apart that computer right now and make space for this beautiful hardware. Okay, and here we are with our donor case. And this is the Pentium 4 system that we had already from that video. So what we're going to do is focus on getting all of these components removed from the computer because we no longer require this hardware, and this is the Pentium 4 board. And this will be used in a future video. I mean, we can utilize this hardware somewhere else. We're just taking advantage of the beautiful design of this case and the ability to fit that motherboard in here properly. Okay, first thing we're going to do, as we always do, is remove the ribbon cables from the motherboard. Pretty straightforward. We have some nice IDE cables here for the hardware. There we are. We have our power supply for our ATX there. And this power supply is much newer. It's been a replacement one, tested just fine. So we have our chassis fan there. We'll remove that. And then we also have, it looks like an audio cable there. We'll remove that as well. So it looks like we have a gig of RAM, so it'll come in handy in the future for sure. Okay, let's remove this motherboard. Okay, so we have the motherboard all out there. I mean, overall, it's a great looking motherboard, very functional, and it's an Asus P5S 800-VM for anybody keeping track here. So if you want to look it up, feel free. But again, not going to be utilizing this board for a little bit, so I'm going to be putting it into a safe ESD bag as well as a box to store it in for now. And who knows, we'll use this in the future for potentially another build. So that's good. And the power supply itself is looking fantastic. Like I said, this looks like it was a replacement one. I mean, there's little to no dust on the actual blades themselves. That's really good. Okay, so the standoffs that are installed in this computer now in the chassis itself, they're taller than the ones that were in that previous case. So we're going to have to move these around a little bit, line them up with the motherboard, and get, basically put them where they're supposed to be. Like, for example, the board goes out to here. There should be one here. There should be one here. I believe these two can be shifted down. These are removable, which are great. And it leaves me with just one missing one based on what I see here. So what I'm going to do is look in my tickle trunk of all the standoffs that I have and see if I can find one to fit this chassis. And I'll get that all kind of done now because I want to get it into a place before we start cleaning, just to have it in a good spot and go from there. Okay, so I've gone ahead and placed all the standoffs where they need to be for the motherboard that we're going to be putting into this chassis. And I had to make some improvisations with some of the actual standoffs. I had to double up the height because that's what those are already installed for this particular case. The IO shield that was in the old motherboard, this was the one that was in this particular case, but this is the one that fits our motherboard. Unfortunately, this is not the same style and won't fit that, so I've looked online. I've ordered one in for this particular system. And of course, it won't be here for a bit, so we're going to continue on, and when it comes in, it means it's fairly straightforward for me to pop that in after the fact. We have a lot of work to do ahead of us to get this all cleaned up because it is quite dirty, but that's okay. We'll do it right now. Let's go. We have everything cleaned up, and as you can see, I transplanted the Pentium 2 sticker from the other system just because, yeah, I think it looks really nice on this case. We'll figure out something else to put here. That's not really where, I'd like to see them. We have specific case badges that can fit inside there, so I'll get something ordered for there, but definitely wanted to see the Pentium 2 inside there as well. Okay, so I think we're in a good shape at the moment. So what we're going to do is get everything kind of reoriented to start installing all the hardware back in this computer and essentially start the transplant. Okay, and so we're back and we have the bench all oriented back to basically to reinstall everything. So one thing I'm going to do is I am going to replace the LG drive with a more, I guess, a little closer in era, keep to a 52 speed burner here is what I'm going to put inside the computer. Plus, to be honest with you, I love the look of this optical drive and I definitely want to utilize it in a build. So I'm going to do that in this computer now. And we have the optical drive installed there now, and we already had the floppy drive installed from earlier, so we're good to go there. Okay, now I'll stick all the wires in here just to be out of the way. And we'll prepare to install our motherboard. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, for anybody who's fast forwarding a little bit through this, I do not have the back IO shield, unfortunately. But I am going to get one. So until then, I'm going to install the board for now, which is fine for what we're doing. And then we'll be good to go. It's pretty straightforward to install. We're just going to slide it in down like this, as if it was going into that IO shield. And we'll pop it onto all the standoffs are. So we have our 1, 2, 3, just making sure we're all aligned here. So all my new standoffs are lining up just fine. And yeah, it looks really good. Okay, let's get all these screws installed into the motherboard. Okay, so we have the motherboard all completely mounted to the case perfectly, and you can see there's absolutely no movement in it. That's key. Awesome. And of course, as I mentioned, the IO shield is missing, but we'll get that in a future video. Okay, so I think what we need to do now is install the dual Pentium 2 CPUs, just because the wiring for the ATX connector will go over that. So I just want to make sure that we have these installed correctly. All right. So I'm looking at the orientation. They're going to go this way in the mounting. But before I do that, I'm just going to take some contact cleaner, as is best practice for this, and spray a little bit in the slot. And we'll slide these in nice and easily. And again, like I said, do not force these. Those plastic clips will break. Okay, so we go here. Nice and easy. There. Here we go. We have the fan installed. We'll do the same thing with the second processor. There we are. There's our second beautiful Pentium 2 processor going in. One at a time, nice and easily. Just line it up, and then it'll snap right in. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is plug the power to the motherboard from the ESU. And where this is more modern, it does have the ability to have different types of ATX, but this only requires it doesn't require the extra 4-pin. So we'll pop this on. We have that installed now, and I love how it has that nice cable management on it, the braid on that. That's nice. Okay, so we have that installed now. So everything in this kind of corner here is installed outside of the fan for the back. So we'll pop in the memory. There we are. And I'm just going to populate the banks in order. And I believe there was an issue when we did this before. And I'm not exactly sure if it was bad memory or if it was an issue with, let's see what we're doing here. 256. I'm going to put the 256 first. An issue with one of the sticks of memory. So I wasn't exactly sure, but we're going to find out when we first turn it on and troubleshoot. So we're going to connect this to the back of the optical drive. And I'm just going to leave it there for now, just because I don't want it draping over everything until we're ready to install it. And next thing we're going to do is install the IDE cable going to the optical drive. So we just have our ribbon cable here, and it is keyed. So, I mean, you only put it in one way in the motherboard. Not all motherboards had that. Not all cables were like that either. So you had to really watch where the red ribbon went to. And so red is to pin 1 on the connector. And then, of course, this goes up, and this will connect to the optical drive. There we are. And again, just trying to keep things as clean as possible as we're going through here, trying to be mindful of everything. And the same thing here with the floppy drive. So we just have this ASUS floppy cable here we're going to utilize for this application. Let's go under this cable here, and I'm just looking at the key pinout, and we're good to go. Molex connectors next. Red to red. Nice and easy. There we go. Because in this case for the floppy, it's actually further away from me, so it's just easier to install the power for the floppy first. There we are. Nice and easy again. And then we'll install the other end of the ribbon cable. And then we still have to install our hard disk. And I just realized that, and I said that to myself earlier, and I totally forgot to do it. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is, I'm just going to remove these two cables for a moment, because in order to install the hard disk, we have to remove this caddy. And you can see there, and then you will see that we'll install the hard disk. And today we're just using our Samsung drive here. We have a 40.8 gigabyte hard drive. It's a Samsung IDE, pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna get this mounted in here, and we'll put this back in the case. Okay, so we have the hard drive installed here, and the chassis, the hard drive enclosure, the floppy drive enclosure. So I'm just gonna pop this back on there again. I didn't mean to say closure, I meant to say caddy, but that's fine. Okay, so we have that installed now. Okay, so we have our hard disk cable here, and we're going to plug this into the motherboard. And this is an 80 conductor cable for better performance. There we are. So we have that plugged into the hard disk, and now we just require power down here. And I did it this way because if we ever decided to install a secondary hard disk here, we can. We have the power there for that. And the same thing with the power required, if required, for another optical drive. So we have the ribbon cables all connected. We have the power all connected to our optical, our floppy, and our hard disk. Okay, we have this wonderful little optical cable floating around there for now, as well as our extra power for our chassis fan. I'm just going to start popping out these guys. These are just little fillers for this particular case design. There we are, see? So we can start to populate our cards. Our first thing is going to be our video card, and that's our Rage 128 Pro. There we go, pretty straightforward. Okay, we have fewer cards going back in this time, just because we don't require them all. And the next thing we're going to do is install, I'm going to step down a little further just to give that video card some breathing room. Okay, now we're installing our network card. Here we are. And if you notice this time, none of the cards are bent down, which is what was happening before. So we have that installed now. And this is our Sound Blaster 16 card. Okay, this system's looking really darn good if you ask me. Yeah, I mean, we have our 2 processors installed here. We have our RAM installed. We have the fan connected for both of the CPUs. We have our video card, our network card, and our sound card. And yeah, I mean, over here, we need to put in our audio cable, which is right here. Pretty straightforward. I believe there's hardware monitoring on this board, so it's important to have that. So we have those 3 installed. So we have our 3 fans installed. We have our audio cable for our sound card. So we have a brand new coin cell battery. Pop that into the socket. There we are. I have the LED, power LED, the switch, the hard drive, all that stuff all plugged back into the motherboard. And I stood up the case. And you can see it's a very awesome looking case. Love the design of the case itself. Plus, I love the fact this motherboard fits effortlessly into this case. And it just feels cleaner. It feels, quite frankly, much more stable, and none of those cards are bending and everything lines up nice and correctly, which is exactly what we're looking for to prevent any sort of additional damage, if there's any at all, but any damage to any of the components that were in this computer. Okay, I'm going to set up the bench now to get all situated so that we can put the front of the chassis back on the front of the case, as well as get the monitor, keyboard, mouse all set up so we can see if the system will post. Here we go. And there we are. I don't know about you, but that's a beautiful looking system. That's our Pentium 2, 450, 350. I'm not sure yet. We haven't tested posting yet. And maybe I'm celebrating too early, but when you look at this beautiful case, I mean, that Sony drive is really setting it off for me. I'm loving that. And of course, I didn't realize that this system actually has a Sony branded floppy disk drive as well. So perfectly matched. And then of course we have our Pentium 2 sticker here that I moved down. And I think it's just an absolutely beautiful looking machine. Of course, our Sun monitor. All right, let's hit the power button and, well, cross our fingers that we get something on the screen. And I hooked up all the wires right. So far, so up. The post beep. We have post. There we go. All right, so it is a Pentium 2 350, and it's detecting both CPUs, 420 megs of RAM or thereabouts. And we have our Creative Sound Blaster 16 plug-and-play card detected here. Our chip away virus, all good stuff. So we have our drives. We have our Samsung drive, which is our hard disk, and then we have our secondary drive here, which is our Sony CDRW. And of course, it's going to complain about all our defaults loaded and all those good things because, you know, hey, we replaced the battery in this, so we know. And so I'm going to adjust the monitor a little bit here. It's not exactly reading the right resolution, so I'm going to get that fixed up right now. Okay, so I've tried adjusting the monitor. Unfortunately, this monitor doesn't allow me to adjust the horizontal or vertical sizes, only the position. It's unfortunate for sure, so I'm going to have to swap this out for the HP. Nothing wrong with the HP, just I love the look of the sun, so I'm going to get the HP switched out for us to be able to get a better view of the screen. Okay, so I've gone ahead and swapped out the HP monitor here, the Sun for the HP monitor. It's slightly bigger as well, so we'll have a better view of the screen as we go through these things. Okay, so it's saying F1 to continue or Del to enter setup. All right, so we have our standard CMOS setup. I have everything set to auto. I'm going to shut off a couple of these options because we know there's no drives in those sections. We also have the drive A set for 1.44. That's perfect. And of course we have our memory, which is looking great. Let's go into our BIOS features setup. So our internal speed is showing 350 megahertz. I mean, you can go in here and tweak this, no doubt. We're going to leave everything as is for now. I'm not seeing anything in here right now that I'm going to change at the moment outside of our boot sequence here. So A and C is fine. Let's just change that to A, CD-ROM, then C. That's good. Under our power management, looks pretty good here. It says user defined. I'm just going to go disable for now. We don't need to go into suspending or anything. Everything looks good here. And then so we have our chassis, our fan speed here, which we have that running in the back, which we connected. And then we have our CPU fan speed there as well. And it says power fan speed. I mean, I'm going to put that in there. Why not? And then we also have our motherboard temperature, which is reading 27 degrees. It's not detecting the CPU temperature for some reason. I'm not sure why. don't know if that's done for whatever reason through the motherboard or because it's dual core or dual CPU, so I'm not sure why it is doing that. I'm going to click on Save and Exit Setup to make sure that our battery holds out. So I stole this drive out of another computer that I was going to set up and I never ended up using it. So that's why you see it all already going to a command prompt and there's nothing on the drive itself. I just formatted it and got it all ready, which will all be gone, of course, when we decide to install an operating system. I struggled quite a bit with this as to what I was going to do in terms of an OS. So given all the dates and the timelines between operating systems and the actual release of the Pentium 2 350, and then gauging that and balancing that with the release of the date of the board, and then adding into all that mix of operating systems that will support the dual CPU functionality. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, driver compatibility, how much work has to go into actually finding those drivers, depending on the operating system, depending on all the different stuff you need to take into consideration when choosing an operating system. In this particular case, we're going to go with Windows 2000. Now, I did consider NT4 for quite a bit for this particular build, but I think this particular hardware is overkill, in my opinion, for that operating system, given the age of it and given the hardware that's in the system versus, say, Windows 2000. Now, obviously, you can go in even further if you want. Now, XP is a little too much, I think, for this computer. That's more of the P3, P4 era. And yeah, so I struggled a bit with this. Now, this was a standard Pentium 2 with 350 with single core. I'd probably install Windows 98 second edition and play around that era. But in this case, there's a huge jump before you start to have dual CPU support. All right. So the other thing I want to make note is I did add a mouse to the setup here. And also I want to make note of the BIOS version here for a moment. This BIOS version is release date 12/08/00, which is version 10.13, which is right here. And that is the latest stable version. So whoever had this prior to myself upgraded the BIOS to the latest update. Now, there is an experimental or beta version of the BIOS. I believe it released in 2001 or 2002 for this board, and that was the last one that was released, but it was never deemed stable. So I didn't go there with this. If I run into any problems, I'll consider it possibly, but for now I'm leaving it as is. The second thing I'll say is Windows 2000, the biggest complaint that I read online regarding the dual CPU support is the ACPI causes some issues with the CPUs based on this board. So essentially what happens is that you'll go into your system and look at your resources and the CPUs will be running at 50% because the ACPI compatibility, and there's something going on there. I didn't get too far into the weeds with that, but there's a couple options. So you can either you can tap F8 during the installation of Windows 2000, tell it to install in a multi-core system, and it bypasses the power management side of the business, and you're good to go. The second option is, of course, based on what I read, is that Asus allowed the boards to be sent back to their manufacturing plant, and they would solder on a piece of, I don't know if it's a resistor or what have you on the motherboard that would potentially provide that functionality and remove any issues. All right, let's get the disk here and install Windows 2000. Okay, here we are, all freshly installed with a brand new copy of Windows 2000 Professional. Let's just see what we have going on here. So the sound card is working. I do have my USB drive plugged in the back there with Snappy Driver Installer. Not sure if it works with this version of Windows. No, I'm having an issue there, so I'll have to look at that in a moment. But I do want to check out the properties under our hardware. So we do have Microsoft Windows 2000, Service Pack 4, Retro Recall. We have our odd number of RAM just because of the sticks that I had, but we'll get that sorted out here later. So under hardware, we have our device manager, and we'll take a look here and see what we have in terms of our devices here. So we do have under our computer ACPI multiprocessor PC. That may be causing a problem here. I'm not sure. We'll take a look at that as I mentioned earlier. We have our USB disk that I have in the back there, plus we have our 40 gigabyte hard disk. We have our Sony CDRW drive, picked it up no problem. And then continuing on here, I see our Ethernet controller, our D-Link is not showing. Our unsupported device, not sure exactly what that is. And we have, of course, we have our VGA compatible video card that's not installed either. So then we have our ports are fine. Our Sound Blaster 16 installed, no problem. That's in our ISA slot. And then we also have all of our wonderful system devices and all that stuff installed. So I'm just going to check out the task manager here because I was told that if the computer, which is idling, okay. So you can see the dual CPU here. We do have them installed. Windows 2000 is detecting them. However, if you notice here, it's hovering at 50%. It's literally grinding away at the CPU for no reason. There's nothing else going on in the operating system right now, but the confusing thing is, if you look here, it shows the system idle process is at 90+%, which is what you want to have it at. So the confusion here, of course, is the fact that the CPU is continuing to be used here. And I don't exactly know what's causing this outside. I believe it's the APCI compliance there. There's something going on with that setup that's causing this problem. And I read online that this would happen in a dual CPU environment. So there is a way around that. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe this, get it all reinstalled, and see if we can bypass this problem specifically. Okay, so we're back to the desktop and you can see the image is way better. And in real time, it's been a few hours. To be honest with you, I struggled quite a bit to get some of these things going, and I'm going to walk everybody through it. So the first thing we're going to do is just, well, first off, we'll close that, but we're going to go into Control Panel for a moment, under our Device Manager. And I really want to show everybody what I had to do to get this going. So if you remember in the previous scene, now for me it's been a few hours, so I'm going to go over this for a moment. But in the previous scene, we were running at 50% CPU usage, no choice. I mean, no matter what we did, it wasn't going to be below that, even though the processes said the system idle process was at 99%, and the actual CPUs themselves were heating up. I mean, it was really warm next to the CPUs, and I mean, that's fine. It's not damaging to the CPU outside of the fact that it's working quite hard. And the minute you would do anything in the system, unfortunately, use some of that performance. So we definitely wanted to fix that. So one of the things I had mentioned was I was going to reinstall Windows and hit F6, install a certain driver and all that. Anyway, I didn't have to do any of that. So essentially what you do is under a computer here. Now this is what worked for me. You do your own thing based on your own research, but this is what I had to do. So here, if you remember here before, it said APCI compliant PC or multiprocessor PC. I forget exactly what it said. But essentially what you have to do is right click on that and go to Properties. Under Driver, click on Update Driver. And then from here, you would display a list of drivers to choose from. And so the MP is Multiprocessor Standard, the MPS, Multiprocessor PC. So I had to go in and specifically choose that as an option. So you can see that it's saying that, no, this is what's compatible for this computer. But I had to go in and choose specifically this one right here. Once I did that and restarted the computer, it went through and re-added all the hardware for the computer automatically using the Windows 2000 setup once the computer restarted. Once I did that, then no problem. It was able to go in under Task Manager and see our dual core, or I call them dual core, but there's two CPUs, and it's now running at 0%. Like I can do things, pop around. It's obviously working. that's where it should be using. It's saying, hey, I'm good. I don't need to work right now. Since I did that, it's just the computer is flying now. There's absolutely no issues. Now, what's the repercussions of doing that? Based on everything I read online, I'm seeing that there's some power management stuff that goes away as a result of doing that. But quite frankly, I don't utilize a lot of the power management stuff, so I'm not too worried about that. Anyway, all that said, definitely a challenge, quite a challenge to get that in a place where the performance is good and is detecting both CPUs utilizing Windows 2000. All right, so that's one thing. The second thing is this guy right here, the video card. When we went around originally and did the first part of the video, we talked about this video card being an ATI Rage 128 Pro. I believe it's a Rage Fury or whatever the heck it is. I went online, found it online, was able to go to ATI's website and download the drivers, no problem. Well, it won't install. And it kept on saying that the drivers that I downloaded were not compatible with this card. So I figured, okay, there's a problem with the ATI website or the ATI drivers. So I tried Phil's Computer Lab stuff. I tried the Dell drivers on their website. I tried various drivers, Vogons, for example. No matter what I did, I could not get. I don't know what is wrong with this. I found the 98 and Windows Millennium Edition, no problem. I found the Windows XP drivers for it, and I was able to put those on, but for whatever reason, it wasn't able to detect it. It just wouldn't work. I ended up switching out that video card, this one right here, for an ATI Radeon 9250 with 256 megabytes of RAM versus the 32, I believe, actually is what's on this card. And it also has VGA, S-Video out, and DVI out. So it's a much better card than what this card is in terms of specs. Again, and it did come with the Windows 2000 drivers, no problem, based on ATI's website, and I got it first try. There, hours of work versus first try, and I'm telling you, I'm exhausted over that process. But we do have the Radeon 9250, and of course the secondary is the other display out, so you can hook up the secondary monitor. So we are now having a multi-processor PC. We have a multi-display adapter video card. So we do have all these installed now. And these are the trials and tribulations you go through when you work on a system such as this. And this is something that, I've been working over the last few days, getting, you guys have the benefit of having the edits and everything kind of combined, but it's quite a bit of work to get from one system to another, specifically the Transplant, and where you want to really get the computer looking really nice. And, getting the computer installed, getting the hardware installed is half the battle. The other half, of course, is going through the operating system installation. So the other thing I want to call out is this other device, this unsupported device. So I have Snappy driver installer that I tried to run on this, which Windows 2000 is supported by that application. Amazing application. But for whatever reason, it would not work on this computer. I couldn't get it working. I downloaded the newest version, still wouldn't work. I gave up on that. And I believe it is the chipset driver or something to do with the chipset. That's the only other thing I can think of outside of all the other drivers I've installed, including our network adapter. Our D-Link network adapter has been installed as well. So outside of that, it's something to do on the motherboard itself. I downloaded some drivers from the Asus website, so I just haven't had time to install that yet to get that corrected. But anyway, at the end of the day, we have 99% of the drivers installed. It was definitely quite the challenge to do it, but we're better off for it at the end of the day. The system is absolutely just flying by now. I mean, everything, it's just a well-rounded system. Now, the purpose of this computer, when you think about if you have a motherboard such as that with dual processors and limited access to operating systems back in the day, that you can actually utilize both CPUs. So this was probably used in a business environment where you had the ability to install business type software, run business type applications. Maybe it was CAD design, things like that, where you really could take advantage of the dual CPU process, the dual core, that what we would call today. We take for granted today what we had. But, back in the day, you'd have two processors on your motherboard. It was really something to have that. Specifically, this motherboard, where it's the P2B-D motherboard, it has a wide array of options and compatibility and features that you can do on this computer. Okay, the system's built. We know we can use it for business. Fine, whatever. That's boring. Let's see if we can play a couple games on this Windows 2000 dual CPU system. And here we are at the end. Absolutely exciting to be at this point and look at what you see in front of you. Just a beautiful sight in front of us. And I'm telling you, it's even better in person. Going from that old desktop system that had the motherboard misaligned, that was bending the cards and potentially causing some damage over time, we were able to do the transplant, take all that beautiful retro hardware and move it into this beautiful case. We were able to get the case completely all cleaned up, upgrade the optical drive, the Pentium 2 350 dual CPU, which is running just fine here now. We have a little over 400 megabytes of RAM. I'm going to get that changed over to 512 megs so that it's all nice and even. We have the 40 gigabyte hard drive that we have in here. We even upgraded the video card by chance just because of some driver compatibility. And that true Sound Blaster 16 card that we have in there that's working to this day. Absolutely beautiful setup, running Windows 2000 professional. And it's not all about work, it's about play too, and we were able to have this well-rounded system to be able to not only do business applications, but also play some games on. I'm really excited to have been able to bring this to everybody on the channel. I'm really excited to see what's next in store for this system and very happy to have this in the collection. That said, if you liked today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Helps the channel grow. Hit the notification button, change it to all. You'll be notified of new content such as this. Please leave a comment down below. Did you have one of these cases? Did you have one of these systems with the dual slot 1 CPUs? Pentium 2, Pentium 3, let me know down in the comments. I love to hear absolutely every one of your stories. I respond to every single comment. Always making new content. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.